Hello, last week I talked about Nintendo, talking about what I hated. This week I'm going to talk about what I actually liked about Nintendo. Back when I was a kid, back in the early 90s, I had a regular Nintendo, and some of my fondest memories, one would be, of course, Legend of Zelda. I remember playing Legend of Zelda, trying to get through it. Haven't really beaten the game, but I loved playing it. It was one of my first experiences playing like a dungeon crawler, because it's kind of like a dungeon crawler mixed with a little bit of RPG. I really liked playing the game. It was very good. I didn't have a map, so not having a map was really hard. I did not have Nintendo Power when I was a kid. I'm not one of those people that had one. Legend of Zelda, I loved all the elements to the game, but going from Legend of Zelda, a game that I really liked when I was a kid, was Gauntlet. I played every level in that game. It took me 6 months to beat it when I was a kid, but I beat Gauntlet. I had a spiral notebook full of the codes, the passwords to get further and further and further in the game. I remember just playing as the warrior, which started it, because still to this day, I still only play as a warrior class in any RPGs. I remember going through there trying to get the gold, the treasures, kill enemy after enemy, and I keep thinking I got farther and further, and I thought I'd make it, and then I'd die, and then I'd just keep going, keep playing, keep playing, keep playing. I loved it. It was a great game. But in that game, you also had 3 other classes. I never played video games with people when I was a kid, but I really just loved it. It was awesome. It was an awesome game. But also, when I was a kid, I learned about hardness. Because what gamers today don't realize, there is a difference between NES hard and hard. Like, Dark Souls will be the closest things I could think to NES hard, or Bloodborne. But you had games like Battletoads, which they hold your hand until you get to the 3rd level, and then you got the Turbo Tunnel. Never made it past the Turbo Tunnel. Then you have games like the original Double Dragon, or Silver Surfer. Ninja Gaiden is legendary for how hard it is. The Ninja Gaiden series is pretty hard. You also have the creme de la creme, the Mega Man series. Now, I will tell you right now, I am one of the biggest Mega Man fans. I've never beaten one of the games. I barely beat the Robot Masters, or if it's the Mega Man X series, the Mavericks, I barely beat them. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy them or can't enjoy other people playing the games. I freaking love those games. They're great games. And some of the other games that I used to play on there, Castlevania. The Castlevania game, everybody talks about the first one and the 3rd one are the best. To me, I love Simon's Quest. I've beaten the game, I've played the game, I love it. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest is a good game. People get mad because it will switch on you pretty quick, going from night to day. But if you can look past that, there's ghouls and Frankenstein monsters and hunchbacks and zombies and werewolves and vampires. Such a variety of monsters in that game, and you can constantly buy different whips to play differently. It was a very good game. But some of the games I like that most people don't talk about, I liked 8 Eyes. 8 Eyes is a pretty cool game, a little bit like Castlevania. There's a game called Pro Wrestling on the NES. It's not a WWE game, it's not a WCW game, but it is just called straight up Pro Wrestling. It's all cartoony, but it's a good wrestling game. It has good mechanics. The game was really fun, and I remember playing it a lot. But I also remember, looking back, I played a lot of shitty games. There was a lot of fucking retarded games. We had almost every LJN game. I remember Jaws pissed me off to no end. Really. And Back to the Future, I think I only made it to the milkshake part. I hated that game. Dick Tracy hated that. Ghostbusters hated it. But then there's always the thing that everybody gravitates towards Mario. Super Mario Brothers, the first one, it's a classic, but it's not one of my favorite games. I'm not a Mario fanboy. I don't understand why Mario is always the cornerstone for Nintendo. That's all they ever focus on. To me, I love Metroid more than Mario. Metroid was a great game. It's all about going around, and you're always going back and forth. It's always constantly moving, because you're always trying to find better weapons for where you need to go next. Not to progress through the game, but better weapons to progress through the game. But also on the Nintendo, you had Contra, which everybody loved. I never played Contra as a kid, so I can't give my opinion on a retrospective. I have played it recently, and I suck at Contra. And no, I do not know the Contra code. I had RoboCop, though, and I liked that game. I had Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which was a pretty good game, if I remember correctly, when I was a kid. We had Ikari Warriors. I had Godzilla, but the Godzilla I had was complete simulation, and I hated it. But I love the Double Dragon games. I love beat-em-ups for the most part, whether it be Double Dragon or another one that I would probably say would have to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. I beat that game. I loved it. It was pretty good. I've never really been good at puzzle games, so Dr. Mario, Yoshi, Tetris, all those games. I never really played much of them. So, for the most part, Nintendo was something I played a lot. But then when I played Super Nintendo, I found the really good stuff.
Cousin, where the hell have you been? He came with my daughter at school. Asked me to watch it nice. I'm watching it nice.
It was really good, and I really liked playing it. Hold on a minute. My cat turned on the TV. Sorry about that. Super Nintendo, I really liked a lot of the RPGs. Whether it be Chrono Trigger, or Secret of Mana, or Super Mario RPG, the Final Fantasy games, because I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I love the RPGs on there. I love Donkey Kong Country, the Batman beat 'em up, Batman Returns, that's on the Super Nintendo, Battle Maniacs, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Mortal Kombat, Earthworm Jim. There was this game, it was like a shooter game that I played when I was a kid, and you like shoot records or something, and it has like Aerosmith music, like Generation X or something. That was a pretty good game. I remember games like MDK, Aladdin, Lion King. I really got into them. It's just, after the Super Nintendo, I really lost interest in Nintendo. Because I loved where they were going, and there were some franchises that were better than others, obviously, but they focused too much on little kids stuff. Like Nintendo 64, some of the big titles were Mario 64, King's Quest, which is one of the worst RPGs I've ever played in my life. You had 2 horrible Castlevania games. You had Legend of Zelda. I love Zelda, but you have Legend of Zelda, kind of a kiddie Zelda. You have Banjo-Kazooie. You have Jet Force Gemini. Aside from games like Duke Nukem 64, Doom 64, Quake 64, you really had a core base of kids games. And since then, Nintendo has continued on that trend. But I can always look back and say, Nintendo and Super Nintendo had amazing games. And they were games, like, how many systems can say they had A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th video games on their system for kids? You can't. And Super Nintendo having Mortal Kombat, having Street Fighter, having Bram Stoker's Dracula, having Nosferatu, having a bunch of horror games. But not just the horror games, then you have Doom and Wolfenstein. I really loved how they were back then. I really wish Nintendo would get back to that. And that's my outlook on Nintendo. They were a company that once were good. Hoping they get back there again. Maybe one day they will. But next week on the show, I am going to talk about Sega Genesis. My love of Sega Genesis and why it is, to me, a very amazing system. So I will see you next time. I will see you next Thursday, right here on the Funhouse.